Deputy in rural Wartrace, Tennessee. Ricky received his bachelor's in business from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and a Master of Fine Arts from the University of Southern California's Film School. Ricky is also a former film and radio talent, and he also is a former collegiate athlete. So thank you for joining us today, Ricky.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. And so today our topic, entertainment and social justice and its impact on criminal justice. I think that, I guess we'll begin with the whole issue of, and when we talk about social media, as we're also talking about news media and its impact on criminal justice, and also sports as well. So there's a whole lot of topics and a whole lot of things that we can actually talk about today when we talk about film and television. One of the things about film and television is that there's a couple of competing interest or competing issues with regards to film and television and how it impacts. I mean, on one hand, we have this issue of film and television and how it negatively impacts, the criminal justice system, because some believe that because of what's being seen on television, and I know that just recently I was speaking with Dr. Bashir about, I just went and watched Superfly. And he was a little bit hesitant to go watch Superfly because, he remembers the 1972 version of Superfly where obviously those, of course we call them blaxploitation films. And there's many of those who believe that blaxploitation films has two negative impacts. One being the fact that it may encourage individuals to become more involved in criminal activity just simply because it kind of makes it seem cool, the criminal element to be cool to be a pimp or to be a dope dealer. And then on the other hand, there's also this idea that blaxploitation films are films that put certain individuals in a negative light also will have an impact on how we're seen by individuals in the criminal justice system, not just in general. And just, being an attorney and being involved in criminal trials and picking juries is very difficult to pick a jury that is unbiased, because you have individuals that come in there and part of maybe their influence and maybe their only interaction with people who are minorities may be from their perception of what they've seen on television and on the media. Then we also have this whole issue about the fact that I think that cinema is probably one of our biggest exports, around the world. I remember after Black Panther, I was watching this piece where they were interviewing some individuals from Asia, and in this interview, they were speaking about how their entire impression or their how they felt about African Americans had actually changed just by simply watching Black Panther. So I mean, so cinema has a significant impact on the way people perceive certain people, and that has an impact, I guess, directly and indirectly how we're treated by the criminal justice system, both the way we see ourselves and the way other individuals actually see us. So from your perspective, especially being involved in the industry and actually being, someone who was actually trained at, in film school, what is your opinion about that?
Well, my opinion is that media and television, the training that I received, started when I was 16 years old. Right. I became a news director in a small town. So when I was 16 years old, I remember reading off the AP wire that John Lennon had been shot. So that was the beginning of my training in journalism, and it was a different time. And as far as television and news and journalism, I see it being attacked and criticized a lot now. But having grown up and being trained in that traditional journalistic tradition, right. News, journalism, and television has no one to blame but themselves. And the impact of film and television is it's our biggest product that we export and that we sell as a nation around the world. And as you said, I've had encounters where I deal with international individuals and their whole view of America, whether it's African Americans or Latinos, comes from television and film. So the impact and the power cannot be underestimated, and nor can it be taken for granted. So you know, yes, its impact is twofold. It cuts from both ways, and I think that I've been really hoping and that as you know, our communities get influence over money, that they would start, you know, creating products that were balanced in reflection, because the images that we've seen throughout the years of the inception of television in the 50s and development in the 60s and up to the point that I was working in the 90s was that they were poor stewards of our image. In fact, it was one of the things I tell people in talks like this. People will say something like, well, yeah, the images of African Americans or Latinos has been routinely negative in media. And partly it's you know, just we haven't had decision makers and writers and people behind the scenes. But the thing that people don't realize is partly it's by design. And it serves a purpose, not for our community, but it helps create a product that is marketable to a broader perspective. When I was, I'll give you a different bent. We'll talk about entertainment. Let's talk about, you know, I don't want to take it somewhere you don't want to, but music. You know, conscious music, jazz. You know, we created an art form, you know, in our community that we handed off. And then it comes back during the, you know, late 80s, like, you know, late 80s and 90s. I was there when Def Jam, you know, was created. And I was there, you know, during the 80s and 90s when our music was talking about an experience. You know, Fuck the Police was not a song written just to say those words to titillate and to sell. They were talking about real things going on here in Los Angeles in our neighborhoods. And what you have now, and I saw in the late 90s and in the 2000s, it shifted. And that was by design. They did not want Public Enemy. They did not want music that had a message that was uplifting. Because drama and conflict sells. You can't have a great movie without conflict. So they use that to market it, and music has gone from conscious hip hop into something that is degrading to our culture, degrading to our women, and not really reflective of our culture.
That's so true. I mean, when you talk about and that's funny, you talk about the conscious hip hop, and I mean that's kind of like when you look at, you know, Brand Nubian, you look at Rakim, you look at KRS-One. I mean, it was just Public Enemy, just you know, artist after artist after artist after artist, who was talking about so many positive things.
And groups.
And groups,
You listen to music now, you can look at this is by design. You don't have the groups, you have the individual. You know, and all of that is you know, driven by, you know, economics and the dollar, but also what I see, because I was trained in it, it has a spiritual connotation too. And by spiritual, I mean I'm not talking, you know, morals. I'm talking about you know, the human, the humanness of it. And you know, when you project these images, it has such a powerful image. You know, because yeah, I am a CEO and I am a principal of a company, but in what I do, I'm on the ground. So I'll go down to downtown LA, and I might be needing to get some flowers at the Flower Mart at 2 a.m. And I can see the people that they're used to dealing with that look like me. You know, it's either fear or, you know, you're less than. And, you know, I don't embody that. I don't personalize it. But it's because of those images that are being sent out.
Right.
It has nothing to do with our interaction. It has nothing to do with my person or my being.
Right, right. Yeah, it's amazing, man. I mean, when you think about that, and how, and one of the things that we talk about is when you're talking about the issue of, and I'm going to talk about sports a little bit too, is that, and then we talked about a little bit last week about some of the protests that were going on and kind of how they were being criticized, sports, you know, like Colin Kaepernick and the fact that he was kneeling, and and some of the other players who have joined in that protest, you know. And I was watching, maybe it was about a week ago. It was an older episode of Football Life. It was about Jim Brown, and I remember and I remember he was showing it was actually this picture that it's always engraved in my mind, where you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown, you had Muhammad Ali, and you know, several other different players that were together.
The meeting,
to deal with these social issues
and make sure they were all on the same page,
right?
Because I'm sure they were all independent thinking men.
Yeah.
You know, each of them bringing a lot to the table, but I'm sure they all had different, you know, like we're sitting here. I want to know your your way of doing things, and you know your, I don't want to say agenda, but your focus and perspective, and it was cool that they kind of got together so we can have a united front,
right?
You know, and still keep our own, you know, ideas and identity is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
And I mean, it was just, to me personally, I mean, I just felt like the backlash that Colin Kaepernick experienced as a you know, in response to his protest, peaceful protest, you know, was you know, it's just amazing how they attacked him for basically doing something in such a peaceful manner. And then, of course, you have those who, you know, for different reasons. There are those who say, well, that's not the place to do it. You know, you don't want to do it on a football field. He's working, and, you know, that's, you know, he shouldn't do that. You know what I mean? And then you have, you know, obviously he was not protesting the flag. They made it out of his patriotism thing, that he was, you know, he didn't support his veterans, or he didn't support his country, or he's something other than patriotic, just simply because he was engaged in his patriotic.
That was by purpose too,
right?
To distract and to obstruct and to shift the focus from the purpose of the protest. The purpose of the protest was ignored.
Right.
And again, that was, you know, it's a good way to gaslight, which we're seeing a lot in our society.
Right.
And that's what happened. And for me, being who I am and talking about the experiences that I have of being a CEO and a principal, but, you know, dealing on the street, you know, I'm not living in an ivory tower. I'm not working in an ivory tower. And Colin was the first athlete since the men from the meeting, you know, because I had the whole period of, you know, Michael Jordan and even with Magic, there were the same things have been happening in our community. And when that did happen, I stayed away from the fray because, you know, I had been, Colin was the first athlete of any stature to speak up for people like me that this is happening. As a CEO, personally, let's see, this is 2018. You know me. We grew up together. I'm a, you know, CEO at Urban Green. We're family. I did a little calculation. I'd been stopped or arrested 57 times.
Wow.
I think I had been handcuffed 18. And I don't have any, you know, criminal record. So this has been going on for a long time. And in the last 5 years, I own a business, so I'm robbed, and, you know, my wife is here, you know, looking, and, you know, I'll go to my business and it's robbed, and I'm handcuffed and pulled on and told I'm lucky I wasn't shot. And So these things are going on with me, and so when it happened, when he kneeled, and the reaction, I was so past it. You know, I had been boycotting the NFL, I think, since 2013 or 2014, just because of the way I felt like it's a. I don't want to use too strong a word, but it feels like a upscale plantation system.
That's what it is.
It feels like and you know, I grew up in a southern town that had a population of probably 15,000 when we were growing up. And then when I left that southern town, it had a population of maybe 10,000. And the buildings are crumbling, and the infrastructure's not there. But that football stadium and that school, it is pristine. It's painted. And they expect the young African-American people there to play, you know, and they expect you to play every sport. I know you probably got it. I had people go up to, my dad was an entrepreneur in our town. He held an auto clinic. And when I decided to pull myself back from playing, you know, football, baseball, basketball, because I had my own vision, you know, I used to look at the Brendan Tartikoff, you know, a guy from NBC. So I wanted to work at the local radio station. So I stopped playing sports. And the local banker came to my dad and like, Mr. Smith, you need to talk to your son. We really need him on the football field, and it's going to be awfully hard for you to get any business loans in this town if your son's not playing. And my dad told me about that, and he just made it simple. You can't please everyone, so you may make sure you please yourself in life, and you'd never succumb to that type of influence because it's all around you. Right. So he laid it out for me like that, and so I read books like Darwin's Athletes, and so I never really, even though I had ability, maybe not in my chosen sport, I wasn't down with what I saw happening in the NFL for a very, very long time. Not to mention the concussion issue. That's very real, and I was aware of it, a lot earlier because of injury to a nephew. So, so when Colin took that knee, I had already stopped my support visually of the NFL and financially.
Right. Yeah, I know, man, as far as the situation with the NFL, the fact that it's, it kind of, when you begin to think that now, of course, just recently the NFL came out with some sort of rule that prevented, they're going to be fined, I believe. I think
they can stay in the locker room.
Right.
If they do not, wish to stand for the national anthem. If they do come out onto the field, they are to stand and in the proper way, that they're stated proper way, and so really it was confounding to me why they would bring it back at this time. It's like the NFL. You look at what's happening in the NBA and their stance. Right. The coach of the Golden State Warriors stepping up, LeBron James and the players, and Steph Curry saying, no, 45, you misdirected, you obscured what this young man's sacrifice was, and made it about patriotism, and that really hits hard for me because my father served in Korea and Vietnam, and he had to live through that. And how is a man that got out of duty with a bone spur, injury that I have and have worked with and played with, just so he could get out of war, but he's going to comment about patriotism? It's the way, it's the modus operandi, it's COINTELPRO, it's the same book, and if we want to relate it to sports, what I have seen in the years, being a true, my family have owned land in this country. I'm not part of the corporation. this is pre-1928. So my family has owned land in this country since 1926. And I consider myself a citizen of the United States. And I don't consider myself a patriot. Patriots are con men to me. Citizens go out, they do the work, and they support the people in the community. I have not seen that from the individuals that have taken the attention away from what the protest was about. It was about African American and Latino people being mistreated by the police in the United States and every all across in every part of the community. And when they make it about patriotism, that's where scoundrels hide.
Right.
And so that's been the same way in this country. All we see are cycles. This is like Reconstruction again for me.
Right.
After certain gains, in 2008 with the Obama presidency, this is like a reaction toward the other way.
Right.
And they want to distract from the truth and distract from the real focus of the protest.
Right.
To keep status quo.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, there's those individuals that look at it from professional athletes, basically you're there to play sports. You're not there to use it as a platform to, make statements or to become a social activist. You're using this platform and the individuals, that goes back to what you're talking about, where it begins to start seeing this plantation ideology where you're thinking, okay, you're here to do what you're supposed to do. Be quiet, do what you're supposed to do, and you don't need to use this as a way of making your social statement. In other words, and that's kind of troublesome to me, and that kind of brought me back when you're saying that they're using the when they attacking him as if he doesn't have a right to do that. You're here to do something. You stay in your place. But then, for example, like when Tim Tebow took a knee in his protest for abortions, right? Then you didn't see any of that same type of dialogue or that same type of people being upset that this guy is using his, status and using the fact that he's in the NFL to, support his cause. So in other words, I mean, there was clearly a double standard when it came to that issue. And also the fact that, what is also troubling is the fact that you had the President of the United States weighing in on the whole idea. That's what really blew it out of proportion. You got him tweeting and going on social media, trying to destroy this man because he was doing something positive. And the reason why, and it goes also back to the whole idea of what you were saying, Ricky, when you're saying that they want to change the narrative. So media and social media and entertainment, it all goes back to the whole thing is they're trying to create this narrative, and so
Story.
Now, exactly, and now that we're so intellectually lazy and we don't really want to read things and find out things for ourselves, it's these sound bites. You get these things from whether it's talking about entertainment, because you're using entertainment to kind of like paralyze you, to get you from thinking. And then you're using the new soundbite to kind of like direct you into certain narratives without you actually thinking about it. You see what I mean? So I think that when you begin, and that's the same thing when you start talking about the whole idea of the music industry, and when you start talking about that, and I remember there was one artist who had he had sold millions or made millions on social media in his in the work that he was doing, and they were offered him a deal, and he refused that deal. Who was that? Do you remember who that was? Was that Chance the Rapper or somebody?
It was a few of them.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, Chance the Rapper.
Yeah, and so basically,
Chance.
and so basically, the young man was brilliant. Because he was not going to see they were going to buy him, and when they buy you, they buy your content. They buy it's almost like the auction block. So then they get to control what you're saying, they're going to water it down, and then you don't have the opportunity to say the things that you want. And that's what's happened to many of these other artists, is that basically the major record labels are not signing these artists that were popular, or the artists that basically have things positive to say. And if they do sign them, then they shelve their work. They don't want to put anything positive out, or when they, because listen to some of the stuff that you're hearing, man.
It don't need to be positive. It just needs to be, part of our culture and real. I mean, there's some negative things that happen in our culture that we're talked about, but it needs to be talked about in a way that uplifts, whether it's negative or positive.
Exactly.
And that's the thing that they want to take from the equation,
right?
Because they want that intellectual laziness that you were talking about earlier, and entertainment.
Right.
I used to separate news and entertainment, and the lines have blurred. One of the reasons that I learned when I was in business, and I had difficulty with it, and it's one of the reasons I moved out. I backed away because it's also used to distract. It's used to, well, they call it program, so it is programming. It's used to drive and funnel and direct, society's thoughts and their impressions about men with dark skin, or just people in general with dark skin, or poor people in general. And it's used to also, distract people for, the fact that we don't like what's going on, in our, federal government, and we don't like the police brutality on a local basis. So it's just part of the same distraction of all the liquor stores in our community. It's the same distraction of the rise of pornography, which is also a social issue. So the social media and entertainment in general is distracting our society and also programming it in a way that benefits a very, very, very few of our society.
Yeah, when you look at it, you look at all of the different, like when you say cinema, and you look at the movies that come out. A lot of the movies that project a positive image, on African American, they don't make it to the big screen. You look at, for instance, Spike Lee, blackballed, for so long, but we don't see a lot of his movies anymore. The Hughes brothers, we don't see a lot of their movies anymore. We only see those types of images that is put out, that are negative. I remember watching a movie, and I kept telling you about it not too long ago, called Life of a King, with, what's his name, Cuba Gooding Jr., which is a very positive movie for youth. You didn't see it too much on the big screen. You didn't even hear about it. So when I came across it, I thought it was a jewel. So I showed it to all of my youth. When it comes to the music, same thing. If you go back to some of the movies that they made with NWA, they say, hey, look, you can't make music like this because it's not going to sell. We missed the X-Clan. Like you say, we missed the Public Enemy. We miss all of that. And those images and those the language that is put out, those were things that we needed in order for us to be progressive in our community, in order for us to be productive, But we don't see a lot of that. Social media then took it. Like if you go to social media right now and you look at, you got 15 blacks on the street right now fighting, people will share that video 1 million times. But if you come out with something, very positive, it gets shared 1,000 times. And that's just, this is, like you say, it's by design. It's by design. And at some point, we have to create our own, right, where we can, project those images that aren't being projected on our behalf.
Right. That's true.
I want to just say one thing where we're talking about social media and entertainment, and it goes to the fact that you said at some point we need to, create our own. That time is here. There are people with resources and money, and I'm disappointed in them. And also want to say on your point, at some point, anyone listening out there, you have to take it upon yourself. Like I said, I started boycotting. Personally, I didn't put it up on Facebook. I didn't call you and do it. We did it in our own home, and so people. You talked about the social media and the fight videos. 15 black folks fighting. At some point, if as a people, then we need to stop digesting that, because as I said, conflict sells. Drama sells. That's why the real. Housewives,
right, yeah.
that series sells, and Love and Hip Hop and different programs because of the conflict. I can find things entertaining other than conflict. So we as citizens, I want to say, first of all, please be citizens and don't be consumers, because then you're playing into the game and the losing mindset that they really want you to. But you have to say, I'm going to be disciplined enough to control what comes into my mind space, my family's mind space, and into my home.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
Well, a lot of good stuff has been said. Let me add a few points from an elder's perspective. First of all, we clearly need to understand is he who tells the story defines the history. And it was said a long time ago by very progressive revolutionaries, if I can control the thinking process that the individual operates from, I have nothing else to do in terms of the control of that individual. We've got to understand, as Ricky said time and time again when we talk about by design, there are certain things, if we look at historically the perspective of how this country has operated from the perspective of bringing slaves and on, they have a perspective of what they want to do. Our issue is becoming volunteer victims and allowing that narrative to orchestrate our reality. See, this is where we go awry. We can sit here all day and talk about what they are doing, and if we don't bring the progressive action steps to change that dynamic, the shame is on us. Power speaks to power. And when we look at and think about the lack of decisions that are being made, not to make a decision means that you take a position. And this is referring to our athletes. When you go back to John Smith, when you go back to the revolutionary movement of the 60s that challenged the pro-structure, knowing the sacrifices that were going to be enshrined upon them, that took a gut check. That took a courage that we have not seen. We don't understand in this dynamic in the last 2 or 3 generations what collective sacrifice means. Collective sacrifice means that I might not benefit individually, but if the power base I'm operating from, if my community and my people benefit, we all benefit in that process. The brother talked about the individuality. That relates to that. Now, when we think about protest has always started from a seed of dissatisfaction. People don't protest because they're satisfied with the status quo. They protest because the conditions have become so adverse that they cannot stand to operate within that narrative anymore. So they're willing to step up and stand out and go against the power structure and say, we are going to stand against this and I'm willing to take a blows. The difference is what we see now is a lot of moments. We don't see true movements. What our young man, from the 49ers did was put a movement in place. Movements continue. Movements take effort. Movements take sacrifice. Moments are emotional situations that make us feel good at that time period. And when you're talking about a movement, you're talking about making those sacrifices that's going to be able to sustain both in the long and short term what those movements are. Lastly, when I look at my entertainers and I look at my athletes who say, well, I'm only entertaining and I'm only an athlete, that's bull crap. Okay, when you know your narrative is in a position of leadership, when you know those people that are supporting you are looking at you from that perspective of being a leader and defining to some degree their reality, you have a responsibility that you cannot chuck and say, I'm only doing this for the benefit of entertaining. No, you have to stand up and you have to take a position and you have to make sure those people who are following you know what you stand for, know what you represent, and know how much you individual sacrifice in terms of what that looks like. So when we talk about that whole movement, and lastly, when we talk about that visual presentation, we all know perception is everything. And my perception is my reality. So if my perception is of you and you're defining what my reality is, that becomes everything that drives me, that moves me, that builds me, etc. So again, if I've been in that position of leadership, and let me be real clear, you don't pick leadership. Leadership usually picks you. So if you're picked to be that leader, if that community is looking at you as that leader, there is a moral, a spiritual, and a psychological responsibility that you got to bring to the table to do the best for and by those people who do look for you in that leadership role.
Right.
Well, one of the issues with that is the difference between leadership and celebrity. The microphone and cameras will always go to celebrity.
That's right.
And
That's
what
right.
we have is too much celebrity and not enough leadership in our society.
Agreed.
And the other aspect, again, I got to take it right back to my people. If you're going to, and if you, celebrity culture is very destructive to our society
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
Because there's no leadership in it. And if there's no leadership, there's no core to it. And it's frivolous and it kind of blows with the wind. And as you said, it's momentary rather than building or structure an organization to make structural change.
But I think it goes back to what you said, the difference between citizen and consumers. You know, when it comes to those individuals who are celebrity, they in it for the dollar. They don't care what it takes. If I got to dress up like Shanae to make a couple of dollars because it's going to demasculate my child because he's going to continue to sit there and watch it, and I get my pockets is fat, but my child is sitting here watching somebody like Shanae or me. I don't watch the Tyler Perry movies. I'm sorry to say that, but just me. You know, but it just emasculates your children. Your children sitting up there and thinking that it's acceptable to do certain things. And so those are the type of things that I stay away from. But at the same time, it goes back down to that dollar bill. You can't tell me nothing about being a leader. I'm here. I'm just an actor. I'm just the entertainment. I'm getting this money put in my pocket. Okay, if your kid's going to watch it, you allowing your kids to watch it. That's the way they see it.
That's the way they see it. That's the way they
But
see
see,
it.
Mike, we don't hold those, excuse me, Brother Bilal, we don't hold those individuals to our operating standard. If it's about money for you, but it's a degradation to me and my family and my people, I'm going to call you behind out.
Exactly.
We excuse the actions of our people too much. And don't bring that responsibility of putting them in check. And that's why they have gotten away with what they have gotten away with. Real quickly, I want to go back to the rappers. Now let's look at the origin of rap. The origin of revolutionary rap came from the last poets.
Yes.
Okay, let's call it like it was.
Yes.
The origin of revolutionary rap came out of the movement of the 60s, which afforded a strategic template for how to move forward. That's when you had the prison industrial complex. That's when you had the drugs come into the community. That's when you had a flora of things which destroyed the community. But the point of it is we always have to go back and look at the rationale as to why things happen. What the inducement of real rap was doing, it was creating a strategic mindset of operation. It was creating individuals who had the ability to think and move as opposed to emotionally respond and react. And that's what had to be destroyed. But I gotta go back to the whole narrative here is we, and I think it's been echoed by all of us, we have to clearly understand our people have to start defining their own reality and quit being orchestrated to move in a direction because of a feel good, because of what you assume would be trinkets at the end of the day, etc. And we've got to understand we are going to have to take some blows to get where we need to get. Until we take ownership, until we assume that ownership, we will never be looked at in a position of power and equal power to be able to move this narrative forward.
And, you know, real quick, and you just, I'm just listening to you and seeing how you talked about the last poets and how everything got twisted from that.
Yes.
You know, everything got twisted. And I remember reading stories about Friedrich Engels a long time ago about dialectical spiritualism, right? But Karl Marx came along with the dialectical materialism. But he took Engels stuff and he twisted twisted it to materialism. And I think this is, it falls all along that same line to where you have individuals who were spiritually conscious, right? And then that dialectical materialism came in and just took fold and took hold of us and took us in a totally different direction, which was very destructive.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, aren't we seeing a pattern here?
Yeah.
Is this something that
Well
is
said.
something
Well
that is
said.
becomes that is elevated, in its origin, that is uplifting in its origin.
Right.
Then it's, would you say, twisted?
Yeah. Yeah.
To become something reptilian, I'll call it.
Yeah.
Something base. And I don't mean Chuck D's base. I mean, so I'm seeing a pattern, and so as I said, it is by design, and we as a people, use our power. We don't use our power.
Use our power.
We don't use our power.
don't use
We
our
want
power.
we want to always. I'm saying we, and I even.
Yes.
We sometimes, as a CEO, I want to give my power away. I don't want to. I'm always making the decisions. But as human beings, as a society, we do it much too easily and way too much. And because that way, we don't have to think about it. We can have, I can sit down and have my drink, or I can sit down and turn on the TV and watch a little football and forget about my problems. I understand that we all need a release, from our life, but it'd be better to not be reactionary, and to be strategic, so that you have that space in the life, so you're not allowing in those negative things that that take away your energy, that take away, your connection to your higher self.
Right. Yeah. I know that one of the things, and I was thinking about this earlier, one of my favorite movies by Spike Lee called Bamboozled. Anybody ever seen it?
Yes.
They didn't do very well, but it was a hell of a movie.
Exactly. I mean, I think that, some things like that, man, that should be, something, it kind of clearly goes to the point of what they're doing. You see what I mean? And I remember I was reading one time, and I should have looked it up before I came here today. There was actually I don't remember whether it was a congressman or a senator that really blasted Spike Lee for making that movie, Bamboozled. And you had to ask your question, what would it have been about that movie that would require or that would bring him out to criticize it? But the reason why is that he basically put the entire industry on blast. You know what I mean? For the way that we've been used. It's all blackface in many ways, the way in which some of these shows that we're looking at. And I'm not going to call any particular, producers or filmmakers out, but a lot of the stuff it is blackface, you know what I mean? And so when we're looking at some of these things and we've accepted the fact, how can you accept the fact that I could say that our people in general are minimized, or to the degree that we can only see them in certain aspects. We're seeing now that we're beginning to start seeing films and start seeing movies that are a little bit more positive. But at the same time, I think that the impressions that we have of certain individuals, or specifically our people, is, killing us in a way that I don't think that we truly understand. You see what I mean? So
what I would like to see from our community, I'm going to use a term that's not even part of my lexicon, but is out there, is a broken window policy, if you will, toward police brutality, toward bias and racism. And what I mean by a broken window policy is that we let too much go.
Right.
I've been guilty of this as much as anyone, because there's just so much. There's so many battles to fight, even on a daily basis. You got to pick them. But the thing is, you have to do it, because if you let it slide, we see what's been happening. Look at where we are right now. We're having this discussion about a footballer, Colin Kaepernick, who protested and wanted to express himself by taking a knee. And somehow that gets convoluted into that the NFL players are spoiled, unpatriotic I'm not even going to call them out of their names, but sons of a dog. I mean, that was just inflammatory, and it was ignorant, and there are people that are so happy and applauding it because, I'm not saying it worked because we're talking about the issue, but they just want to divert it from, our suffering and the issues that the real issues that we face on a day to day, because I'm not separated from the street. And so that's what irks me about the athletes who don't, speak up, right now. It's going to be interesting. NFL, I started, he's just not a very smart commissioner or smart integration. I really admire what Adam Silver's doing in the NBA and their approach, but they brought this up again. It was settled. And they've had so much, bad PR. You would think, like my mom would say, if you don't know what you're talking about, sit down before they realize you're ignorant. But the NFL brought it up again.
But when you give up your power, like we have, they think they could run that game and do it again, and there's not going to be resistance from us. Man is designed for greatness, but conditioned for failure. And it seems like we're adopting that mindset as we move forward.
Do you think when I won't be watching, and
No.
That's my own personal decision, but I encourage everyone that's seeing what happened, just don't watch it and don't support the advertisers. And particularly what they've done, and what they've done with Colin, and you, sir, as being a lawyer, it's going to be really interesting because when they start the season, and players, some players, spattering of players are coming out, and the cameras is always going to be, doing something else instead of looking at players, looking at the flag. But what's gonna transpire then? Right. Where are they gonna take this conversation? And does Colin have a lawsuit of collusion against the owners because of this new rule? This new rule basically says that was the whole reason why this guy isn't playing in the NFL. So it really helps his case. So I don't know where they're going with this or why they did it, but it seemed like a mistake to me.
Yeah. And I guess as a millennial myself in the room, I feel like I can identify with the fact that we are seeing kind of more positive movements and more positive movies out there. Yet it's also important to note the fact that a lot of the impressions for our people in our communities also derive from social media movements. And they derive from YouTube, Snapchat, Twitter. Our president himself has used these social media platforms to reach people out there. And, I can agree that we live in this celebrity culture, and it is very destructive, like Mr. Smith mentioned, and it goes to social media. We excuse this behavior so much so that we have this multi-billion-dollar industry, YouTube, where 75% of adults turn to YouTube for nostalgia rather than tutorials or current events or political information, where 60% of the people that have been kind of polled, they say that they prefer video platforms to television, personal life events, and even movies themselves. So I feel like it's really interesting to kind of see that, we are living in this culture where social media is truly important, and seeing, players kind of come out and stand for a movement is something very interesting and very empowering to us young people, because we live by the moments. We live by that 5-minute video, by that 1-minute video that you see him kneeling down, and you're like, okay, he's kneeling down. Why is he kneeling down? You look at that in a minute, and then there, snap.
I have a question for you, kind of and the question is, being a YouTube user, I feel like I started getting in a ghetto of YouTube because of the algorithm, and it started, and I would do research on YouTube about the opposition, and all of a sudden, when I hit my phone and I click on YouTube, it's everything I don't want to see.
Exactly.
It's point of views that aren't, and it's because of doing that research. So my question to you is the balkanization of our society, and how social media has had an impact on that. And by balkanization, I mean that I'm looking at YouTube, and the algorithm is showing me, it's encasing me in a world with my perspective. The reason why I know that is because I'm looking at YouTube, and it's not my perspective, but it's my research.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking of an individual that thinks away. If they go on YouTube, they're only going to get the algorithms are only going to give you what you click on and what you want.
Right.
Yeah,
And
totally.
That creates a ghetto to me.
Yeah, exactly. It does create kind of this sort of
digital
bubble.
ghetto.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to kind of inform everyone out there listening to us to tune in every Sunday and to also go to our social media website, justicewatchradio.com, where we have all of our previous episodes and where we also kind of inform you and give you that platform so that you can contact us. And also every Sunday, you can also call the number 909-792-5222 if you ever want to tune into the conversation. So back to Mr. Ellie.
Thank you. You know what? We definitely could keep going on this on this topic, man. But one of the things I promised, this is Father's Day, and also I want to make sure that I acknowledge all the fathers out there and say Happy Father's Day to all of you. One of the promises that I made to one of my friends were that we were going to discuss real quickly, because he's one of those basketball, crazy about basketball. So I said we're going to talk about this before we leave, and it's the every question, every topic about basketball. We know that the Cleveland Cavaliers actually lost the NBA championship, so everybody's saying who's the GOAT. I said, I'm going to ask Ricky who the GOAT is. And by the way, Ricky was a collegiate basketball player. So my question to you is, who's the GOAT? Is it MJ or is it LeBron?
We have a transition going. We have a transition going. I'm going to say the GOAT is currently at 5:58 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Michael Jordan is the GOAT.
Okay.
I think by 6:02 Pacific Standard Time, LeBron is going to be. LeBron needs to get those additional championships. And, Kobe was right, because it's established. It's a history. It's a culture and a history, and it's about championships. Right. And, I will say Michael Jordan is the GOAT, but I think that LeBron will overtake him. I think that the other thing I want to say is that, what I really want to say is the GOAT is dead. There is no GOAT, because even when people are talking about Michael Jordan, for me, Michael Jordan and Oscar Robertson are tight, and you have these things that are generational players, and they don't translate, generationally. Right. You can't really, during the rules were different in the Jordan era. It was a much more physical game. So I think that, a person that says Jordan is a GOAT would say, oh, if he played now, he would average 10 more points a game. Right. And if you're LeBron, it's like, well, they didn't have the same athletes. So so.
Well, let me ask you this question. I know hopefully we won't run out of time. But anyway, so real quickly, who was the best point guard?
Ever in the NBA?
Yeah.
In my opinion, the greatest point guard, man, that would have to be Magic Johnson.
Okay.
That would have to be Magic John.
Okay, who was the best center?
Oh, man. My favorite center, and I think one of the best players, and he's up for the GOAT too. People forget about the players from the past. It's Kareem.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm saying Kareem because of high school champion, many, few losses, college championships and few losses, NBA. So, Kareem.
I understand one. Man, we ran out of time, man. I had another comment too. But at any rate, man, I appreciate
it. It's been fun.
Yeah, it definitely has, man. I appreciate you coming in, man, and hopefully, man, you can come in and join us and chime in again when we have a similar subject, because we definitely can expound on this. But
listeners, you're more powerful than you know.
Yeah.
Use your power.
Yeah. So until next week, Zulu Ali and the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Clark, and Dr. Akil Bashir. We'll see you next week, same time, same place, same channel.
Your NBC Sports Radio update starts now.
Busy sports weekend. I'm Jeff Nathanson. A whole lot of things to share with you. We'll start with Major League Baseball in progress right now in St. Louis. Bottom of the third inning, Cubs and the Cardinals are scoreless. Cubs had the bases loaded in the top of the third, but got nothing out of that. That's the only Major League Baseball game in action at this hour. Jose Quintana pitching against Jack Flaherty of the Cardinals in that one. On the scoreboard, Orioles dropped the Marlins 10-4. It was the Rangers over the Rockies 13-12, thanks to a 4-run bottom of the ninth inning for Texas. Phillies beat the Brewers 10-9 despite 2 homers from Eric Thames of Milwaukee. The Angels blew a 5-3 lead in the ninth, and they ended up losing in 11 to the Athletics 6-5. Jonathan LeCroy had the game-winning hit in that one. Mike Trout, a couple more hits. Mike Trout hitting .328 right now. That's solid. The Red Sox beat the Mariners 9-3. It was the Mets over the Diamondbacks 5-3. New York had to rally to win that game in the ninth inning. Giants beat the Dodgers 4-1. There were only 7 hits in the game combined between both teams. This was one of them.
3-2. Belt hits a fastball to deep left center field. Moving back on it is Bellinger all the way to the wall. He jumps up. It is gone. Opposite field power for Brandon Belt. Just to the left of the 375 sign, and he crushed that one. Second home run of the game for the Giants.
And they beat the Dodgers 4-1 as you hear the call on the Giants radio network. Chris Stratton got the win for San Francisco. Blue Jays beat the Nationals 8-6. Indians 4-1 over the Twins. Same score, Braves over the Padres. Reds 8-6 over the Pirates. Rays beat the Yankees 3-1. Tigers over the White Sox 3-1. The Astros over the Royals 7-4. Golf action, Brooks Koepka wins the U.S. Open. World Cup soccer, Mexico upset Germany 1-0. Tennis, Roger Federer wins in Stuttgart. Jeff Nathanson, NBC Sports Radio.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM,